Welcome back. I'm Rachel, and we have some things to talk about today. Y'all, pull up a chair. I want to talk to you about a sentence I have heard so many times in the last year that I have started keeping a little mental tally. The sentence goes like this: I'm just really focused on my healing right now. And every time someone says it to me, I have the same question. The question I have learned not to ask out loud because I'm nice like that. The question is, healing from what? Now, listen, sometimes there's a real answer. Sometimes a person has been through something genuinely terrible and they are doing the actual work. When that's the case, I have nothing to say except I'm proud of you. Keep going. That is not what this episode is about. This episode is about all the other times, the times when I'm healing seems to mean something more like I'm 23 and I'm tired. I had a rough breakup and I read a book about attachment styles. And now I have a vocabulary for why I am the way I am. I'm trying to build a life and it's harder than I thought. And healing is the word everyone else is using, so it's the word I am using too. And here's what I've figured out. I think the word healing has eaten a different word. I think it ate the word self actualization. And we have stopped being able to tell them apart. And honestly, I think it's making us worse. So that's where we're going today. Buckle up. Segment one: the 20-year-old healed person. Let me describe somebody to you. You know this person. You may be this person. I have been versions of this person, so I'm not throwing stones from a glass house. I built the glass house. She is 22 or he is 24. They have a morning routine. They journal. They have done some therapy or they're about to, or they wish they could afford to. They know their attachment style. They have an opinion about their parents that they can deliver in 2 clean sentences. They have ended at least one friendship this year because the friendship was, and I quote, no longer aligned with where they are going. And if you ask them how they're doing, they will tell you they're on a healing journey now. I want to be careful here because everything I just described, the journaling, the therapy, the self-knowledge, the willingness to walk away from things that are not working, all of that is good. I am not making fun of any of it. I am a fan of all of it. The problem is not what they are doing. The problem is what they are calling it. Because when you press on what healing actually means for this person, you do not find a wound. You find a goal. They're not recovering from something. They're trying to become something: a regulated person, an evolved person, a person whose nervous system is settled, whose relationships are clean, whose career is purpose aligned, whose mornings are slow and beautiful and posted to Instagram with a sound that sounds like rain. That, my friends, is not healing. And that is a portrait of self actualization wearing a therapist's cardigan. And here is why this matters. Here is why I'm not just being a grump on the internet. Those two things, healing and self actualization, are wildly different projects. And treating them as the same thing produces a very specific kind of suffering. Healing has an end point. Healing means something hurt me and I'm no longer being hurt by it the way I was before. I can function, I can love, I can sleep. The scar is there, but it doesn't run my life. That is healing. It is possible. Real people do it. Self actualization does not have an end point. That is the whole point. It is the lifelong work of becoming more of who you are. It is a direction, not a destination. It is never done. And when you confuse the second one for the first one, when you treat becoming a full human being as a recovery project, here's what happens. You become a person who is never finished. You become a person for whom every ordinary difficulty is evidence that something is still wrong with you. You become a person who is in permanent rehab from being alive. There is a line I want to leave you with before we move on. 2 versions of healing. Pick one. Version 1. I will reach a state where I am never triggered, never reactive, never destabilized. I will be done. Version 2. I can live my life and handle my stuff without burning everything down. Version 1 is unreachable. It's not a goal, it's a fantasy. And it is the version most of us are quietly aiming at because it's the version that gets posted online. Version 2 is real. Version 2 is healing. Version 2 is honestly what most adults are doing most of the time, and they don't think it is particularly special because it is just called being a grown-up. Segment 2. What Maslow actually said. So, how did we get here? To answer that, I need to give you a quick tour of a guy named Abraham Maslow. You have heard of him. He is the pyramid guy, the hierarchy of needs. Stay with me. I know psych theory can sound like a college lecture, but two things about this model matter enormously for what we are talking about, and almost nobody remembers them. In 1943, Maslow published a paper called A Theory of Human Motivation, and the central idea is one you probably learned in high school. Humans have needs. Needs come in an order. You have to handle the basic ones before you can deal with the fancy ones. Tier 1, physiological, food, water, air, shelter, sleep, the stuff you die without. Tier 2, safety, stability, security, money, not getting hurt walking home. Tier 3, love and belonging, friends, family, intimacy, being part of we. Tier 4, esteem, respect, competence, recognition, the sense that you are good at something and people notice. Tier 5, at the very top, self actualization, becoming fully yourself, realizing your potential. Okay, here's the first thing nobody remembers. Maslow split these into two categories. The bottom four are deficiency needs. The top one is a growth need. And those words are doing a lot of work. A deficiency need works like this. When you don't have it, you are motivated to get it. When you have it, you stop noticing it. Food is a deficiency need. When you're hungry, you think about food constantly. When you have eaten, you don't. You don't sit down at a fully fed Thanksgiving table and think, but how can I eat more spiritually? Self actualization is different. Self actualization is a growth need. It does not satisfy, it expands. The more you do, the more you can do. There's no point at which you have eaten enough self actualization for the day. So already, you can see why treating self actualization like healing is going to produce a problem. Healing works like a deficiency need. You are motivated because something hurts, and when it stops hurting, you stop. Self actualization works like a growth need. It never stops. If you treat self actualization as something you can finish, you have signed up for a project that will exhaust you forever. That is the first thing. Here is the second thing, and this is the one I cannot stop thinking about. Maslow believed in something called prepotency. Big word. It means the lower needs take precedence. You cannot skip rungs. A person who is hungry cannot meaningfully focus on self-esteem. A person who is in physical danger is not pursuing creative fulfillment. The pyramid is a pyramid for a reason. The bottom holds up the top. And here is the part that floored me when I went back and read this carefully. In Maslow's original model, and I want to underline this, the original model. Self-actualization was the work of a mature adult, late middle age, somebody who had already built a life, whose foundations were already in place. The implication was you spend your 20s, 30s, and 40s handling tiers 2 through 4. You build a stable life. You build real relationships. You build a sense of competence. And then somewhere in your 50s, if you are lucky, you start in on the top one. So here is my question. Why are 22-year-olds attempting self-actualization? Why is the entire performance of healing as becoming your best self being acted out by people who, by Maslow's own framework, should be working on belonging and esteem? People who have not established a career yet, have not built lasting adult friendships, have not accumulated enough years of experience to be competent at much of anything yet, through no fault of their own. That is just where they are developmentally. The answer is that the pyramid did not survive the internet. Something happened to it. We will talk about that next. Segment 3, How the Pyramid Got Scrambled. Maslow wrote in 1943, he did not have a smartphone, he did not have TikTok, he did not have a generation of children who learned to navigate Instagram before they learned to ride a bike. So obviously the model needs some updating. The question is, what kind of updating? Here is how the hierarchy actually functions for people who came of age after, let's say, 2010. Tier 1 is not just food and shelter anymore. It includes internet access. It includes a working phone. It includes being reachable online. And listen, you can argue about whether this should be the case, but it is the case. A teenager without a phone in 2026 is functionally cut off from school, from social life, from jobs, from dating, from most forms of civic life. The internet is now infrastructure. It sits at the bottom of the pyramid next to oxygen, whether we like it or not. Tier 2, safety, has expanded too. Physical safety is still in there, but now it is joined by mental health. Digital privacy, job stability in an economy that does not promise either. Safety now includes the question of whether your data is being sold, whether your job exists in 6 months, and whether your therapist is in network. Tier 3, belonging, is now half virtual. People form real relationships online. They also form fake ones. They form parasocial attachments to people who don't know they exist. The line between community and audience has gotten really blurry, and a lot of belonging is happening in places that do not fully nourish it. Tier 4, esteem, has been completely transformed. Esteem used to come from local recognition. Your boss knew you were good, your neighbors knew you were reliable. Now esteem comes through metrics, likes, followers, engagement, a personal brand, a curated feed. And Tier 5, self actualization, has migrated downward. It is no longer a late life pursuit. It is something 20-year-olds are told they should be working on, sometimes before they have even finished college, sometimes instead of finishing college. Now, here is the part where, if you've been paying attention to the previous segment, you should be making a face. Because Maslow's whole point, the prepotency principle, was that you cannot do Tier 5 before you have handled 2 through 4. You cannot self-actualize on a foundation that is not built. And we are asking an entire generation to attempt exactly that. We are asking them to pursue meaning and purpose and authentic impact-driven fulfillment at an age when, in any prior era, they would still be figuring out how to pay rent and whether anyone wanted to date them. That is not a moral failure on their part. Let me say that again because it is important. This is not their fault. The culture they live in has scrambled the order of operations. It has told them that self-actualization is the entry point, not the summit, that you should be becoming your highest self at 22, and that anything less is evidence that something has gone wrong with you. And here is the dark part. When you try to collapse the pyramid like this, when you try to live on all 5 tiers at once, before the bottom ones are stable, you do not actually accelerate anyone's growth. You produce something different. You produce what I would call psychological survival. Physical survival is hard, but it is clear. You know when you're hungry, you know when you're cold, the needs are visible and the wins are obvious. Psychological survival is fuzzy. The needs are invisible. The wins are temporary. You can never tell if you are done, because there is no way to tell if you are done. And it is all playing out in a public arena where everybody else is performing their psychological survival at you all the time, on a phone you cannot put down. That's the swamp we are trying to grow up in. Of course, healing became the word for everything. Everything feels like a wound when the ground keeps moving under you. Segment 4, How Healing Ate Everything. Okay, so we've got a generation operating on a scrambled pyramid, told to self-actualize before they finish Tier 2, in a culture that runs on therapy speak. What does that produce? It produces a vocabulary problem. Clinical words, words that used to mean specific things, got pulled out of the therapist's office and turned into everyday social currency. And in the process, they lost almost all of their meaning. Let me walk you through the big ones. This is going to feel a little familiar if you have been around social media for more than 5 minutes. Healing originally meant recovery from harm, injury, trauma, illness, sustained dysfunction. Now means I am working on myself, which could mean anything from doing genuine therapy for genuine wounds to redecorating your apartment and calling it nervous system regulation. Same word for both things. Trauma originally meant severe, lasting psychological damage from genuinely overwhelming events. Now means anything that is or was uncomfortable. My boss giving me feedback was so traumatic. It was traumatic when she did not text back. When everything is trauma, nothing is trauma, and the people who actually have it cannot get heard over the noise. Boundaries. This is the big one for me. originally meant a limit you set for your own behavior to protect your well being. I will not stay in a room where I am being yelled at. That is a boundary. Now, boundaries means a rule I am imposing on you to control your behavior. It is my boundary that you do not talk to your ex. That is not a boundary. That is a demand wearing a clinical name tag. A boundary is something you hold. A demand is something you put on someone else. Self care, originally meant replenishing your actual needs, sleep, food, rest, basic maintenance, now means anything I want to do instead of something I promised to do. I am honoring my self care by canceling on you. That is not self care. That is flaking with a halo, gaslighting, a specific severe form of psychological manipulation where someone tries to make you doubt your own perception of reality. Now means you remembered something differently than I did, or you disagreed with me. Narcissist, a clinical personality disorder affecting roughly 1% of the population, now means anybody who was not nice to me last week. Do you see what is happening? Every single one of these terms has expanded to the point where it can mean basically anything. And once a word means anything, it does not really mean anything. There is actually a name for this in academic psychology. A researcher named Nick Haslam calls it concept creep. He has been documenting it for over a decade. The slow expansion of terms like trauma, abuse, bullying, prejudice, until they cover ground they were never meant to cover. Pretty interesting work if you want to go down a rabbit hole. But here is the thing I want to land on before we move on. This vocabulary doesn't just describe what is happening, it shapes what is happening. The words we use determine what we can think. If the only words I have for being annoyed with my friend are trauma and toxic, then I cannot have a normal conversation about being annoyed with my friend. I have to escalate. I have to clinicalize. I have to perform the language of mental health because that is the only language available. And the friend on the other end of that conversation, they are not getting a complaint they can respond to. They are getting a diagnosis they cannot argue with. That is not health. That is not healing. That is a vocabulary that has decided the easiest way to handle other people is to put them in a clinical category and walk away. Segment 5, why this happened and why I am not mad at them. Okay, I want to pump the brakes here because if I just keep going, this whole episode is going to sound like an angry old lady yelling at a generation, and that is not what I am doing. This trend did not come out of nowhere. There are real reasons, good reasons even, and if I don't take them seriously, I'm doing the same thing I am criticizing, using my own framework to dismiss other people without engaging with what they're actually saying. So let me Steelman this for a second. Let me give you the strongest possible version of the case for the way young people are using this language. Reason 1, therapy used to be stigmatized. Back in the day, you did not tell people you saw a therapist. It was a secret. You would lie about where you were going on Wednesday afternoons. Gen Y and Gen Z destigmatized mental health care. They made it normal to talk about depression, anxiety, ADHD trauma. That is a real accomplishment, and a lot of people are alive today because of it. So when they use therapy language casually, part of what they are doing is keeping that door open. They are saying mental health is something we talk about now. That is good. That is worth defending. Reason 2, they genuinely have inherited a hard situation. Listen, I'm not going to make a list of every difficult thing about being 23 in 2026. You know the list: housing, climate, politics, pandemic aftermath, an economy that does not promise anything, raised online, anxiety statistics that are off the charts. The conditions producing distress are real. Healing feels accurate to a lot of them because something is genuinely wrong. They may be wrong about what they're healing from, but they're not wrong that they hurt. Reason 3, self-actualization sounds elitist. I will be honest, when you say it out loud, it sounds like something a guy in a private jet says at a TED Talk. I'm self-actualizing. Healing sounds urgent, necessary. It sounds like a return to who you actually are. Of course people prefer it. Of course it caught on. The branding alone explains a lot. Reason 4, Social media gave them tools they did not have before. Whatever you think about TikTok therapy, it has put psychology into the hands of millions of people who would never have had access to a therapist's office. Some of that is good, some of it is genuinely educational. The kid who finally figures out at 21 that what has been wrong with them their whole life is, say, ADHD or depression. That kid is better off because somebody on the internet described their experience. So I want to say this clearly. I'm not mad at young people for using this language. I'm not lecturing them. I'm not telling them to toughen up or get off their phones or whatever the standard scolding script is. What I am saying is the language they were given does not match the work they are actually doing. The vocabulary outpace the development, and the result is that genuinely good intentions are producing genuinely bad outcomes. And somebody has to name that, because if we don't name it, it just keeps rolling. So if you're listening to this and you are 23 and feeling defensive, please do not be. I am on your side. I just think somebody handed you a map that doesn't match the territory, and you have been trying to use it for a decade, and it's not your fault that you are lost. Segment 6, the costs. All right, now let me tell you what worries me. Because if I'm right that we have confused healing with self-actualization, then this confusion is producing real damage in real lives, and I see it everywhere. Let me walk you through 3 categories of cost: personal, relational, and societal. Personal cost first. If healing is your goal and self-actualization is your secret criterion, you're never going to be done. You've signed up for a project that cannot finish. Every ordinary bad day becomes evidence that you still need more work. Every normal human reaction becomes a dysregulation. Every moment of friction becomes a trigger. You build a life where you are perpetually the patient on the table, endlessly examining your wounds, endlessly journaling, endlessly cold plunging, endlessly processing. And you cannot understand why you do not feel better. You don't feel better because the project was never possible. You weren't trying to heal, you were trying to become perfect. And calling it healing. Relational costs next. This is where it really hurts. If you treat every friction as harm, you cannot have a real relationship. Relationships require friction. Two people who care about each other are going to step on each other's toes, miss each other's birthdays, say the wrong thing on the wrong day, and need to come back and repair it. Repair is the work. Repair is what relationships are. But if every friction is harm, repair is impossible because you don't repair harm, you exit harm. So instead of having the hard conversation, you ghost. Instead of saying that hurt my feelings, you announce a boundary. Instead of doing the messy work of being known, you protect your peace. And what you end up with, and I see this in my office and I see this in my own family, what you end up with is a generation of people who are fluent in mental health language and lonely as hell. People who can describe their attachment style in 12 words and cannot keep a friend for 3 years. People who are very evolved and very alone. And finally, the societal cost, the big one. When everybody is healing, nobody is showing up. Civic life requires obligation. Communities require reciprocity. You have to do things you do not feel like doing because you said you would, and because other people are counting on you. That used to be the deal. That's how communities held together, me culture. And that is what I have been calling this trend in other places. Has rewritten that deal. It has told an entire generation that obligation is oppression, that doing something for someone else when you do not feel like it is a violation of your authentic self, that the highest virtue is honoring your capacity, that you do not owe anybody anything. And I am sorry, but a community where nobody owes anybody anything is not a community. It is a collection of strangers acting in self-interest who happen to live near each other. That is what we are building, and we're confused about why it doesn't feel good. Last cost, and this one breaks my heart. When everything is trauma, nothing is trauma. When everything is gaslighting, nothing is gaslighting. When everything is abuse, nothing is abuse. The people who actually need those words, the people with real, severe clinical wounds, cannot get heard over the noise. We have flooded the airwaves with so much therapeutic vocabulary that the genuine signal cannot get through. That is not a small thing. That is, in my opinion, the most serious cost of all of this. We have taken language that was meant to protect the most vulnerable, and we have spent it on inconveniences, and the bill is going to come due. Segment 7, the reframe. Okay, so what do we do? Because I cannot do an episode where I just yell about a problem for 50 minutes. That is frankly the very thing I'm complaining about. Here is what I want to leave you with. 3 words, 3 different things. We have been smushing them together. Let us pull them apart. Healing, recovery from specific harm. It has a beginning, it has a process, it has a destination. And the destination is not perfection, it is functional capacity. I can live my life and handle my stuff without burning everything down. That is the goal. Healing is finishable. Even if the scar stays, if you have been through something real, you can come out the other side. People do it every day. Self actualization, the ongoing lifelong work of becoming more of who you are, pursuing meaning, doing what you are capable of, contributing, creating. This is a direction, not a destination. It is never finished. It is the privilege and the work of an already foundation life. You do not fail at self actualization, you just keep going. And then there's everything else, which I'm going to call living. Most of what humans do most of the time is neither healing nor actualizing. It's just living, working a job, doing the dishes, arguing with your spouse about whose turn it is to pick up the kid, watching a show you don't love because the other person wants to watch it, getting older, losing people, showing up, sitting in the dentist's office, being bored, being tired, being mildly annoyed, and getting over it. Living involves a lot of discomfort that is not pathology, a lot of friction that is not harm, a lot of effort that is not optimization. A huge amount of what's getting labeled healing right now is just living. It is the texture of being a person. It does not need a clinical name. It does not need a journal entry. It does not need to be processed. It needs to be done. So here's the line I want you to leave with. Write it down if you are driving. No, do not. That is dangerous. Just remember it. Healing is what you do after something has hurt you. Self-actualization is what you do because you are alive. And living is everything in between, and most of it does not need a label at all. Closing. I'm not going to give you a 5-step plan today. I'm not going to tell you what to journal about. I'm not going to give you a morning routine. There are about 9 million people online willing to do that for you. And frankly, that's part of the problem. Here's all I'm going to ask. The next time you reach for the word healing, pause for a second, just a second, and ask yourself which one of the 3 you actually mean. Am I healing? Did something hurt me? And am I doing the real work of recovering from it? Am I self-actualizing? Am I doing the lifelong work of becoming more of who I am? Or am I just living? Am I just having a regular human day with regular human friction and regular human effort? And is it possible that this does not need a special name? Because here's the thing, living is not a downgrade. Living is the whole thing. Healing serves living. Self-actualization serves living. Living is the point. And a generation that's been told that ordinary life is a wound to be healed from, that generation cannot be happy. It's not built to be happy. The framework forbids it. So my hope for you, for me, for my kids, for everyone listening, is that we get to put down the heavy clinical language for the 98% of life that doesn't need it, that we save those words for the moments that actually require them, and that we let ourselves just be alive, which is hard enough on its own, without making it a performance. Y'all, thanks for hanging out with me today. This one took me a long time to figure out how to say, and I'm sure I did not say all of it perfectly. If any of this hit a nerve, good or bad, come find me. I want to know what you think. I always do. Take care of yourselves, and when you can, take care of each other.